What the?
Who do you think the GOAT is?
I am not playing this game.
I just asked a question.
You just hit me in the head with a basketball.
You didn't catch the basketball.
You're gonna catch these hands.
Someone needs a nap.
Did you say goat?
These viral tacos that have everyone, at least on social media, going crazy just come from this humble stew. I've made the tacos several times myself, and they're amazing and they deserve all the hype they get, but I also had the stew when I was visiting Mexico, and it's delicious in its own right. So you'll typically see this being made with beef, especially in the States, but the traditional dish is actually made with goat meat. The term birria just means trash, which is what Spanish settlers considered goat meat to be, but the natives turned it into a delicious dish.
For birria, goat meat is the goat.
So this starts with a handful of dried chiles. I have 2 chile guajillos, 4 chile ancho, and 1 chile de arbol. I'm just snipping the stem off so I can squeeze out all the seeds and the ribs. And before rehydrating these, I'm going to toast them in a pan with some aromatics as well. And those aromatics are a handful of black peppercorns, a handful of cumin seeds, 3 bay leaves, 5 cloves, a handful of coriander seeds, 4 allspice, and a Mexican cinnamon stick. All of that gets dumped into a dry pan over medium heat for a few minutes until it's fragrant. The chiles will go in a bowl where I'll dump over enough boiling water to cover them so they can rehydrate, and then sometimes I bundle up my spices in some cheesecloth and then tie it up with some twine. It makes for easy addition and removal in the broth. I'm also going to prep a couple more vegetables for the spice paste. I have 5 Roma tomatoes that I'm going to cut the stem off of and then cut in half, as well as 1 white onion that I'm going to cut into quarters and then just save 1/4 for garnish later. I forgot to include my Serrano or jalapeño on top of this that I would also toast, but those go cut side down under your broiler for a few minutes until they're charred on top. You could add all this in raw, but this just brings a little bit extra depth of flavor. At that point, my chiles are rehydrated, so I can add those to a blender as well as the roasted vegetables and that Serrano chile that I forgot about. Also a good long splash of apple cider vinegar for some acidity, and then just blend that up until it's smooth and set aside. This paste is what will bring most of the flavor to our broth later. And now on to the goat meat or chivo. I found this at my Hispanic market, and it's just some rib meat from a goat. I had the butcher cut it up into smaller pieces as well, but whatever you get, even if it's beef, I would make sure it has bone on it because that's going to bring a lot of flavor to the broth. There's some silver skin and inedible parts of this meat, but I'm just going to remove all that after it's done cooking because it's going to render down and break apart. So all I'm going to do right now is generously season this with salt and pepper, and then I'll get some oil into my Dutch oven over high heat so I can sear these. You're just going to flip these around every few minutes until you get some dark color on all sides. Just keep an eye on the bottom so it's not burning, and then make sure you're doing this in batches so you don't overcrowd the pan. That's going to get some nice Maillard flavor on the outside of the meat as well as the bottom of the pan in the form of fond. And once all the meat is done searing, before I deglaze the fond, I'm going to add a few tablespoons of tomato paste so I can toast that. I always say this is a great base to have for soups and stews. Just don't let that burn. Whenever it's about to, you can add a little bit of water and start to break up the bottom with a wooden spoon. And once you see that most of the bottom has dissolved, we can add in that chile paste, and then you can add all your meat pieces back in as well as all that juice that accumulated, don't forget that, and then that little spice tea bag that we made earlier, as well as 1 whole head of garlic that I've cut in half, and then a really good sprinkling of dried Mexican oregano. Regular oregano works if you don't have Mexican. And now you just need enough water or chicken stock to mostly cover the meat. I'm choosing to add water, and then I'm just going to mix in 1 heaping tablespoon of better than bouillon chicken paste. And also, since I'm going to be garnishing with cilantro later, I have all these stems that I'm not going to use, so I'm going to dump that in to flavor this broth some more. Now just bring this whole pot to a boil, and once it's there, you can drop it to a simmer and then cover it and cook until the meat is tender. I would start checking around 2.5 hours. Just pull the meat out and stick a paring knife in, and that'll tell you how tender it is. Mine is still really tough at 2.5 hours, so I'm going to continue to simmer until it's tender. Mine took just under 4 hours until it was tender enough for me to poke it. And once you're there comes the tedious part of removing the meat from the broth and then breaking it up into tiny pieces. I feel like goat has a little more tougher pieces than beef does, so there's a lot more stuff that you're going to discard. But either way, I'm just taking 2 forks and shredding this into small pieces once again so it can be in the stew. Just be very careful to comb through and take out any bone pieces that you might find. And then lastly, I'm going to take that broth and then pass it through a sieve. We're going to remove any solids or fibers from vegetables or anything that's going to make this not smooth. The consommé that comes out of this is meant to be silky smooth, so we want to make sure to get everything out. And now we can add the meat back into the broth, and this is our birria. Make sure to season to taste with salt. I always have to add a considerable amount, but it should be deeply flavored and nicely spicy and just overall comforting. You can serve this up just like the tacos with some chopped onion and cilantro, as well as some lime wedges, and of course some warm corn tortillas that I've charred on my gas stove. I just think this looks super heavenly and brings me back to my trip to Mexico. Let's get to the taste test.
It's good to have the good camera lens back. Definitely excited for this one. I mean, I totally get the appeal for the tacos, and that's probably how I would enjoy this dish most of the time anyway. But still, I think it's pretty cool to go back to the origins of a dish and just see how it was meant to be eaten at first. I'm ready for this one. Provecho. If you've ever had birria tacos, this is everything you love about it, just in the form of a comforting stew. But it's still served with some warm corn tortillas, so you have to go in with that. There's really not much to say. It's a lovely deep flavor of those chiles that are brought back to life in the boiling water, and the char from all the vegetables that we charred, as well as the seared goat meat. And then I'm just a huge fan of braised beef, as a lot of people are for good reason. I mean, the flavor is not much different than if you would have used beef here. The texture of this goat meat is something that you'd kind of have to get used to, but it's still delectable. Of course, most of the flavor is carried by the consommé, so that makes sense. I love adding bits of raw onion into soups like this because, I don't know, it just really brings out the flavors and it soaks up everything, but it's also that nice bite of onion that you get. I just remember getting this literally for breakfast one morning in Mexico, and it hit. But yeah, if you love birria tacos, you're gonna love this stew. It would be the same process basically, except you don't combine the meat and the broth. You just form it into some tortillas and then make some tacos out of it. But that's gonna be it for me today. Thank you all for watching, be blessed, and I'll see you next time. Soup is definitely healthy, right?